Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I still think about that summer, though I wish I didn't. It was supposed to be simple, just a couple of weeks at my grandparents' farm in Nebraska before heading back to school. I was 17, stuck between being a kid and whatever the hell it means to be an adult. The farm was my escape, my reset button. It had always been. The nights there were my favorite. Quiet, except for the crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. The air smelled like earth and hay and life itself. It was the kind of peace you don't find in the suburbs. But that peace was shattered on one particular night, a night I've tried to push out of my mind ever since. It started innocently enough. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. I'd been tossing and turning for hours in the stuffy guest bedroom, so I decided to take a walk. It wasn't unusual for me to wander the property at night. The gravel road, the barn, sometimes even the edges of the cornfield. The stars stretched endlessly above me, bright and sharp like shards of glass. The cool air felt good against my skin as I stepped into the moonlit yard. The cornfield loomed to my left, rows upon rows of tall, whispering stalks swaying gently in the breeze. I strolled along the edge, listening to the rhythmic rustling, my flashlight bobbing with each step. There was something soothing about it, like nature's lullaby. But then I heard it, a different kind of rustling, heavy, deliberate, something moving within the corn. I stopped in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. "Hello," I called out, half expecting one of the farmhands to step out with a sheepish grin. Maybe it was a deer or a raccoon, something normal, explainable. Instead, a voice echoed back, "Hello." It wasn't quite right. It was my voice, but distorted, like hearing yourself on a bad recording. My flashlight trembled as I scanned the rows of corn. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice cracking. No response, just the whisper of the stalks shifting in the breeze. I told myself to turn around, to go back to the house and forget about it. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, kept me rooted in place. And then I saw it. It stepped out from the corn, slowly, deliberately, as if it had all the time in the world. At first glance, I thought it was my grandfather. Same denim overalls, same straw hat perched on his head. But something was off. The face was wrong, sunken cheeks, skin stretched too tight over the bones. The eyes were the worst part. They glowed faintly, like the dying embers of a fire, and they didn't blink. I froze, my legs refusing to move. "Grandpa," I whispered, though deep down I knew it wasn't him. The thing tilted its head, mimicking the way my grandfather used to when he was curious about something. "Come back," it said in his voice. "Don't be scared." My stomach churned. The words were wrong, too soft, too calm. I took a step back, and the thing took a step forward. Its limbs moved awkwardly, like a puppet on strings. The more I stared, the less human it seemed. The hands were too large, the fingers ending in sharp, claw-like tips. Its smile stretched too wide, exposing teeth that didn't belong in any human mouth. I ran. I don't remember making the decision to run. One moment I was frozen, and the next my legs were pumping, my lungs burning as I sprinted back toward the house. Behind me, I heard it following, its footsteps heavy and uneven, like it was struggling to maintain the guise of humanity. "Come back," it called again, the voice cracking and breaking like a warped record. I reached the porch and threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and bolting it with shaking hands. The house was dark and silent, but I didn't dare turn on the lights. Instead, I crouched by the window, peeking through the curtains. It was there, standing at the edge of the yard. The moonlight illuminated its grotesque features. It raised one of its clawed hands and dragged it slowly down the side of the house, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. Then it crouched down, scooping up a handful of dirt and corn husks. It stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at the house, before finally retreating back into the cornfield. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found claw marks gouged deep into the door frame, and the pile of corn husks left on the porch like some kind of offering. My grandparents didn't believe me when I told them. They said it was probably a coyote or a bad dream. But I know what I saw. I never went near that cornfield again, and I never went back to the farm after that summer. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, hearing that voice in my head. "Come back. Don't be scared." Whatever it wasn't human, and it's still out there, waiting in the corn. Story 2. I've been driving rigs for over 15 years, and in that time, I've seen my fair share of weird things out on the highways. Ghost towns, abandoned cars, things that didn't make sense, stuff you write off as a trick of the light or fatigue. But what happened to me that night in the Arizona desert, that wasn't a trick of the light. That was something else entirely. It was a little past 2 in the morning, and the stretch of road I was on was as barren as the surface of the moon. Nothing but sand and scrub brush for miles. The occasional cactus loomed in the dark like a silent sentinel. The only sounds were the hum of my engine and the faint whistle of the wind slipping through the cab's cracked window. I liked it that way. Just me, the open road, and my thoughts. Or at least, that's how I usually liked it. This time, something was different. The air felt heavy. You know that feeling before a bad storm rolls in? Like the world's holding its breath? That's how it felt, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Just an endless blanket of stars twinkling cold and distant. I just passed a faded mile marker when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just another hitchhiker. You see them now and then, even in the middle of nowhere. People walking the road with their thumb out, hoping someone will stop. But this one was different. The figure was tall, too tall, and thin, almost gaunt. They walked with a strange, jerky gait, like their limbs weren't quite attached right. The headlights hit them, and for a moment, I thought they were wrapped in some kind of tattered blanket, the fabric flapping in the wind. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a blanket at all. It was fur, mangy, patchy fur clinging to their body in uneven clumps. I should have kept driving. Something in my gut told me to just hit the gas and leave them behind, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I slowed down and rolled the window down a crack. "Hey, you need some help?" I called out. They stopped walking. Slowly, almost mechanically, the figure turned to face me. That's when I saw it, their face. It wasn't a face. Not really. It was like someone had taken a human head and stretched it over a coyote's skull. The mouth was too wide, the nose was all wrong, and the eyes, God, the eyes, they glowed faintly, like the reflection you get when light hits an animal's eyes at night. Except there wasn't enough light for that. Those eyes were glowing all on their own, pale and hungry. The thing tilted its head, studying me like I was the strange one. Then it smiled. Its teeth were jagged and too white, like shards of broken porcelain jammed into its gums. My blood turned to ice. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. My instincts kicked in, and I slammed my foot on the gas. The truck roared to life, tires kicking up dust as I sped away. In the side mirror, I saw the thing step back onto the shoulder, its glowing eyes fixed on me until the darkness swallowed it up. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. Just a weird, creepy encounter to tell my buddies back at the truck stop. But 10 miles down the road, I saw it again. It was standing in the middle of the highway, right in the path of my truck. There was no way it could have gotten there ahead of me. No way it could have moved that fast. But there it was, tall and thin and wrong. I yanked the wheel hard to the left, my tires screeching as the truck swerved. The trailer skidded, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought I was going to jackknife. But somehow, I kept it under control, veering back onto the asphalt. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the road was empty. The thing was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it. The late hour, the isolation, my own nerves, it was all playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, a faint scratching noise coming from the side of the trailer. It was soft at first, like the sound of tree branches scraping against metal. But there weren't any trees out here, just sand and rocks. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like claws raking against the steel. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't dare stop. I just kept driving, praying that whatever was out there wouldn't find a way inside. When I finally saw the glowing lights of a rest area, I nearly cried with relief. I pulled into the lot and parked under the brightest light I could find, the engine still running as I sat there, trying to calm my nerves. The scratching had stopped, but the memory of it lingered, sharp and jagged in my mind. After a few minutes, I stepped out to check the trailer. The air was deathly still, and the only sounds were my boots crunching on the gravel and the distant hum of the highway. I rounded the corner, flashlight in hand, and froze. The side of the trailer was covered in scratches, long, deep gouges that ran the length of the metal, as if some enormous animal had tried to tear its way inside. My stomach churned, and I fought the urge to throw up. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were in the dirt near the trailer. Large, misshapen prints that started at the rear wheels and disappeared into the desert. I shone my flashlight toward the open expanse of sand and rock, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing, just darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't dare. And when the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, I got back in the truck and drove straight through to my next stop, not caring about the schedule or the miles I was burning. To this day, I don't know what I saw out there in the desert. Maybe it was some kind of sick prank, or maybe I was just overtired. But every time I think about those glowing eyes and that too wide grin, I feel a chill crawl up my spine. Whatever it wasn't human, And if you're ever driving through the Arizona desert late at night, do yourself a favor. Keep your windows up and your eyes on the road. You never know what might be watching. Story 3. I used to think ghost stories were just for fun. They were the kind of tales you'd swap around campfires, designed to make your skin prickle and your imagination run wild. But that was before the night everything changed. The night my friends and I stumbled upon something that wasn't just a story. Now I know better. It was early autumn, and the air was crisp enough to feel clean when you breathed it in. My friends and I had planned a weekend camping trip to Utah, near Navajo Nation territory. We'd heard the stories about skinwalkers, of course, but none of us took them seriously. It was folklore, something to chuckle over while toasting marshmallows and passing around a bottle of cheap whiskey. We set up camp near a clearing surrounded by tall pines. The place had an eerie beauty to it, the kind you only find in the wild. The trees stood like silent sentinels, and the stars burned brighter than I'd ever seen. It felt isolated, miles away from civilization, which is exactly what we wanted. By the time night fell, we had a roaring fire going, and the whiskey had loosened us up. We'd been swapping ghost stories for hours, each one trying to outdo the other. Then, just as Sarah was telling us some ridiculous tale about a haunted doll, we heard it. It started as a low, distant howl. At first, we thought it might be a coyote, but there was something wrong about it. The sound was too deep, too guttural, like a man trying to mimic an animal but not quite getting it right. The laughter around the campfire stopped immediately, and we all stared into the darkness, the flickering light from the fire casting strange shadows on the trees. Probably just a coyote, Jake said, trying to sound casual. His voice was steady, but I noticed how tightly he gripped his mug. The howl came again, this time closer. It sent a shiver down my spine. There was an unnatural cadence to it, like it was both calling out and mocking us at the same time. Sarah, sitting across from me, leaned forward and whispered, "Do you see that?" Her voice was barely audible, but it was enough to make us all turn. She was pointing toward the trees on the edge of the clearing. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed them, two glowing eyes staring back at us. They were too high off the ground for a coyote or a wolf, and the way they reflected the firelight, it wasn't right. Those eyes weren't animal. They were too knowing, too deliberate. Before anyone could say anything, the fire flickered and the eyes disappeared. The flames didn't just flicker the way they do when the wind picks up. They sputtered, dimmed almost to nothing, as if some invisible force had sucked the life out of them. Then came the smell. It hit us like a wave, thick and rancid, like rotting meat left out in the sun. It made my stomach churn, and Sarah actually gagged. Jake was the first to break the silence. "What the hell is that?" As if in response, something stepped out from the shadows. My first thought was that it was a deer. It had antlers, after all, and patches of fur clinging to its body. But the longer I looked, the more I realized how wrong I was. The limbs were too long, the torso too human, and the face, God, the face. It was like someone had taken a human skull and stretched animal skin over it, leaving patches bare, so the bone gleamed in the firelight. Its mouth hung open, revealing sharp, uneven teeth, and its eyes, they weren't glowing anymore. They were just black, endless pits that seemed to suck in the light around them. It let out a scream that I can only describe as pure malice. It was a sound that bypassed your ears and went straight to your soul, making every hair on your body stand on end. We didn't wait to see what it would do next. Instinct took over, and we bolted for the car. The clearing was about 50 yards from where we'd parked, and I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. Behind us, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its guttural screeches growing louder. Sarah was ahead of me, and Jake was right on my heels. By some miracle, we made it to the car, piling in and locking the doors just as the thing burst out of the tree line. It stood there for a moment, just staring at us. Then it dropped onto all fours and started running. Not like a human, but not like any animal I've ever seen either. It moved with an unnatural, jerky grace, its limbs bending in ways that should have been impossible. Sarah screamed, "It's following us." Jake floored the gas, and the tires kicked up gravel as we sped down the dirt road. I turned in my seat to look out the rear window and felt my heart stop. It was keeping pace with the car, its black eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought it was smiling. Then, as we reached the highway, it stopped abruptly, standing on its hind legs and watching us disappear into the night. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away. None of us spoke. What could we say? When we finally worked up the courage to return the next morning to retrieve our gear, the campsite was unrecognizable. Everything had been shredded, our tents, our bags, even the cooler. Scrawled in the dirt near the extinguished fire pit were the words, "Leave and never return." We didn't need to be told twice. To this day, I can't explain what we saw that night. I've tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just a trick of the light or maybe a prank by some locals. But deep down, I know the truth. Some stories aren't just stories. Some things aren't meant to be seen, and some warnings, they're better left unignored.